This is something I missed on April 31st, there's no April 31st. This is Michael Carson back with another video. On April 30th, 2025, Rupert Lowe on his Twitter put up a policy paper on immigration. In fact, it's a policy paper on how to do mass deportations for the UK. It's a blueprint. And I wanted to go ahead and read the blueprint. So here's the actual blueprint. And it's titled Mass Deportations, a Blueprint. Rupert Lowe, MP, and Center for Migration Control are the writers of the blueprint. The executive summary is as follows. Executive summary. Bullet point 1. Achieving a program of mass deportations of illegal migrants would, upon completion, save the UK £10 billion annually. 2. Total costs to implement a deportation program would be between £40.9 billion and £47.5 billion over its lifetime. 3. Existing hostile environment measures must be strengthened and greater utilization of public data deployed to ensure voluntary and enforced returns. 4. Partial funding for the program can be drawn from taxation on remittances and the scrapping of bilateral foreign aid to other countries, like countries that import the large illegal, or the countries that export a large numbers of their populations to the UK. I'm going to read the full 11 pages here. So that's the too long didn't read section. Here's the introduction. Research by Pew Research conducted in 2017 suggests that there are between 800,000 and 1.2 million illegal migrants presently living in Britain, of which roughly 200,000 can be thought to be children. This is the second largest illegal migrant population in Europe, after Germany. Those crossing the English Channel on small boats are just a small part of a huge illegal migrant population facing Britain. The purpose of this short research paper is to sketch out the framework which should be adopted for any future government committed to mass deportations. Legal prerequisites. Leave the European Court on Human Rights is the first one. Second one is scrap the Human Rights Act of 1998, which I thought it was 1997. 3. Leave the Refugee Convention. 4. Use of the immigration tribunals. 5. Strengthen the Illegal Immigration Act. Asylum system. Between 2018 and 2024, there were 218,602 detected efforts to enter the UK illegally. Small boat crossings accounted for 151,161, 70% of these efforts. A further 27,229, 12%, were detected at UK airports, and 35,729, 16%, detected inside the country within 72 hours of arrival. By 2024, the data shows an overwhelmingly majority, 84% of the detected illegal entries into the UK come from small boats, 36,816 out of the 43,630. There are currently around 220,000 people in the asylum system, many being housed in temporary and dispersal accommodation. In 2019-2020, the UK spent just £230 million on asylum, border, and visa operations. Yet in 2024-25, it is estimated the asylum system will place a £6.4 billion worth of pressure on public finances. A suspension of all asylum cases made by those entered the country illegally, a 5-year freeze on future asylum claims, and a commitment to deport all illegal entries currently in the asylum system will dramatically reduce these costs in the short time span. The target must be to return the cost of asylum system to an absolute minimum. Identifying and detaining. Immigration enforcement. As set out below, the number of enforced returns, which will be a central component of mass deportation plan, has fallen dramatically over the last 2 decades. There must therefore be a significant increase in the capacity of immigration enforcement. Immigration enforcement was first established within the Home Office in 2012. Between 2014 and 2021, the amount of resource funding it received fell from £437.6 million to £391 million. In inflation-adjusted terms, this was a drop of £96 million, about 20%. The current forecast annual budget for 2024 is roughly $660 million, with just 5,382 staff employed by immigration enforcement. These figures must be increased tenfold, with a new annual budget of £6.6 billion and 50,000 staff working in immigration enforcement across the country. Between July 2024 and March 2025, there were 6,785 illegal working visits carried out by immigration enforcement, which resulted in 4,779 arrests, equating to 1.4 visits per arrest made. This would pro rata to roughly 9,000 immigration enforcement visits per year and roughly 6,400 arrests. Public reporting. In 2024, there were 89,105 reports of immigration and commodity abuse made to the Home Office. In 2019, there were just 66,891 reports, an increase of 33%. In recent years, the average number of reports made to the Home Office has run at around 50,000 to 60,000. More should be done to publicize the immigration enforcement hotline and to incentivize reporting from the public. The current government is encouraging whistleblowers to report tax avoiders by promising compensation for those who report illegal practice. A similar process should be put in place by immigration enforcement, where individuals who provide a tip-off of illegal working will receive proceeds from the fines issued to businesses. See below. Reheating the hostile environment. A 2023 review by the Home Office into the hostile environment, also known as compliant environment, found that between 2014 and 2018, the Home Office shared data with other government departments pertaining to 448,800 individuals who appeared in Home Office systems to not have right to reside in the UK or have certain conditions on their visas restricting their access to work benefits or services. The onus was then passed to those other government departments, DVLA, DVA, HMRC, and DWP, to ensure that those who did not have the right to hold a UK driver's license, illegal migrant, or access taxpayer funds, those without indefinite leave to remain, did not access those facilities. However, of these 448,800 individuals, only 63,786 actually received a sanction, such as the revocation of their driver's license or their employer receiving a letter about their legal status. This accounted for just 14% of those in the Home Office deemed to not have an immigration status. Real commitment to mass deportations will require that each of these identified individuals are properly assessed. This data should also be shared with the greater number of stakeholders, including local councils, police forces, and NHS trusts. Previously, the action taken when an individual was detected as insufficient, for instance, were an individual deemed by the Home Office to not have the right to a driver's license, then the DVLA would simply revoke the license. Instead, all data possessed by the DVLA about that individual should be transferred to the Home Office to identify the whereabouts, detain, and ultimately deport that individual. For example, the hostile environment led to 35,583 illegal migrants having their driver's license revoked between 2014 and 2018, but these individuals were not necessarily then detained. This should also be the same when employers perform their statutory right to work checks, landlords their statutory right to rent checks, and banks their statutory background checks on those looking to open an account. A new statutory obligation must not simply require the withholding of a particular service or employment, but if an individual is found to be ineligible to work rent, that their application details be sent to the Home Office. Previously introduced measures did not contain this requirement. NHS. In 2018, the Home Office abandoned measures which required NHS Digital to disclose non-medical information such as the name, address of potential immigration offenders. The organization which led the campaign against these measures, Doctors of the World, received £602,660 in taxpayer money between 2019 and 2023. All government funding must be stopped to this organization and any other which resists efforts to install order at the border. These measures must be reinstated. Under National Health Services Charges to Overseas Visitors Regulations 2015, the NHS is required to provide the Home Office with outstanding costs accumulated by those given secondary care. Those who required leave to enter or remain in the United Kingdom but do not have it. Illegal migrants fall under charging category F. There is therefore ample existing guidance and legislation which places the legal responsibility of ascertaining whether an individual is an illegal migrant or on the shoulders of service providers. However, current compliance with these responsibilities is minimal and must be increased. NHS trusts overseas visitor managers have access to immigration records which present the current Home Office status for patients awaiting secondary treatment. Their capacities must be upscaled, and they must play a leading role in each trust to conduct an audit on all patients awarded charging category F and adjacent categories for the last 15 years. Translation and interpretation costs are placing a huge burden on NHS trusts. £114 million between 2019 and 2020 and 2021 and 2022. These costs should be covered by the individual requiring the translator, and as such they should be treated in a similar manner to those costs covered by above 2015 regulations. This would require collection of personal non-medical information on those individuals unable to speak English. Employers. Fines levied on businesses employing illegal migrants must be substantially uprated. Fines currently sit at £45,000 for a first breach and £60,000 for each subsequent breach. These rates should be quadruple. At a significantly higher rate, the value of penalties issued between July and September 24 would have been £80 million. After a third detected infringement, the business should be referred to for liquidation. Now, that would hurt. Almost 80% of all illegal working visits are conducted at businesses in the restaurant, takeaway, convenience store, nail, barber shop, and car washing industries. The Home Office must send a nudge letter to all businesses within these SIC codes, which A. directs them towards the employer checking service, B. updates them on the new fine rates for employing illegal migrants, and C. providing information on voluntary returns. As a starting point, there are 233,385 businesses and industries with a disproportionate propensity towards illegal work, which should receive a nudge letter from immigration enforcement. SIC 4520, Maintenance and Repair of Motor Vehicles. 48,645 businesses, of which 3,975 in London. SIC 4711, Retail Sales and Non-Specialized Stores with Food, Beverages or Tobacco predominantly. 32,970 businesses, of which 6,765 in London. SIC 6510, Restaurants and Mobile Food Service Activities. 102,450 businesses, of which 19,465 in London. SIC 9602, Hairdressing and Other Beauty Treatment. 49,320 businesses, of which 8,695 in London. Over £1.5 billion of taxpayer money is awarded on open border charities that have campaigned against deportation plans. The government should look to redirect these funds towards the creation of private sector entities that are focused on identifying and reporting illegal workers. These charitable organizations would operate in similar manner to the RSPCA, which pursues private prosecutions against those breaking the law, or would refer cases to immigration enforcement. The government has significant power through its procurement policies to encourage clampdown on illegal working, with up to 75,000 contracts awarded each year and having spent £194 billion with private companies in 2023, £40 billion of which was with SMEs. There is significant scope to increase right-to-work checks within this ecosystem. Existing legislation would require public sector bodies to make procurement decisions on the basis not just on the value of money, but on the advancement of equality and environmental objectives. This should be extended to illegal workers, and all companies currently holding a government contract and looking to acquire one must produce a comprehensive audit of all workforce, showing checks completed on employees. Similarly, with 6.14 million people presently working in the public sector, all organizations from NHS trusts and district councils to schools and police forces must produce an audit of all employees' right to work in the UK. Housing. Fines levied on landlords for having illegal migrants as tenants are currently £10,000 for the first breach and £20,000 for every subsequent repeat offence. These rates should be quadrupled. Houses of multiple occupancy have proliferated, with councils recording an increase from 7,839 to 27,177 between 2018 and 2023. Local councils, the organizations with details of registered HMOs, must contact all landlords reminding them of their obligations and introduce services which allow landlords to report individuals applying for housing who do not have right to rent, as well as signposting to the voluntary return service. Removal. Detention facilities. Detention facilities. The UK currently has just 2,200 beds in its detention facilities, which processed a total of 20,604 individuals last year. The current capacity must be increased nearly sevenfold to 15,000. For indication of necessary expenditure, construction of Yarl's Wood Detention Centre cost £100 million in 2001, which equates to £184.95 million today for 400 beds. An additional 12,800 beds could therefore cost £5.7 billion. Previous examples indicate the development of these sites could take no longer than a year. With regards to operational costs, it costs £121 per day to hold an individual in detention facility, meaning the entire estate would cost £1.8 million per day, or £662.4 million a year. In 2024, two-thirds of those in detention centers left within 28 days. On this basis, detention facilities would allow for the removal of roughly 195,000 people per year, but this does not include voluntary returns. In 2024, just 43% of the 20,422 people held in detention facilities, 8,893 were actually removed from the country, whereas 50%, 10,366 were bailed out by either immigration judges or the Home Secretary. This is indicative of an extensive legal challenges that are launched from detention centers. A reassertion and strengthening of the 2023 Illegal Migration Act, currently under attack by Labour government, would greatly reduce the ability of migrants detained to launch immigration and detention appeals. Enforced removals. The number of enforced returns has fallen dramatically in the last 2 decades. In 2004, there were 20,435 individuals removed compared to just 8,100 164 in 2024. The number of enforced returns should be reaching 150,000 by the second year. The cost of the enforced removal has previously been estimated at £15,000, which would equate to roughly £2.3 billion in a year. Voluntary returns. Voluntary returns. Whereas enforced returns are within the direct control of the UK government, voluntary returns are reliant on responses from individuals to the hostile environment and the personal and familial decision to leave. Between 2010 and 2024, the ratio of enforced returns to voluntary returns was 1 to 2.2. By 2023, the ratio had grown to 1 to 3.2. This gives us some idea of the number of voluntary returns could take place with a huge uptick in enforced deportations. It is possible, therefore, that a year in which there are 150,000 enforced returns could see a corresponding 300,000 voluntary returns. The administrative costs of arranging voluntary deportations are thought to be around £1,000, with further £3,000 required as an incentive for an individual to volunteer for removal. The total process would therefore cost up to £4,000 per individual. The annual cost of 300,000 voluntary returns therefore would be £1.2 billion. However, for this to be achieved, there must be an upscaling in the current infrastructure for the facilitation of voluntary returns. As set out below, such measures should be funded from the foreign aid that the UK government sends to those nations with large illegal migrant population in Britain. This should include following the lead of the US President Donald Trump by introducing self-deportations, mobile phone app, awareness campaigns that informed illegal migrants of voluntary return service and communication with origin country embassies, ongoing monitoring. Some individuals will leave the country without intervention of immigration enforcement, and so-called independent returns. To monitor and assess the scale of independent returns, it is necessary that the appropriate data collection on exit checks is reinstated. The Home Office does not currently produce data on the number of exit checks being conducted, an important statistic to understand compliance with time-limited study, work, and tourism visas. Since February 2022, the Home Office has these statistics under review. Countries of origin. Those nations with large illegal diasporas in the UK must be made to engage in this process. Existing data on exit checks for the year ending March 2020 allows us to see those nationalities that were mostly likely to overstay visas and therefore most likely to constitute a large part of the illegal migrant population. 1. India. 20,706 did not leave on time. 2. Pakistan. 5,118 did not leave on time. 3. Philippines. 5,025 did not leave on time. 4. China. 4,174 did not leave on time. Nigeria. 3,709 did not leave on time. The aforementioned report on hostile environment found that 448,800 individuals who appeared on the Home Office systems to not have the right to reside in the UK or have certain conditions on their visas restricting their access to work benefits or social services broken down by nationality. We have an indication of the top 5 nationalities likely in the UK without an immigration status. 1. Indians, 16.6% of the shared Home Office data. 2. Pakistanis, 12.9% of the shared Home Office data. 3. Nigerians, 8.9% of the shared Home Office data. 4. Bangladeshis, 7.4% of the shared Home Office data. 5. Chinese, 6.1% of the shared Home Office data. There is a clear correlation between certain nationalities overstaying their visa and existing data held by the Home Office on those individuals in the UK potentially without immigration status. These nations are therefore the most appropriate starting point for diplomatic pressure. Pressure on countries of origin through remittance, taxation, visa restriction, trade sanctions, and withholding of foreign aid is an important part of assuring mass deportations. Economic discomfort increases the likelihood that a government will encourage its own citizens to leave the UK, as well as negating some of the reasons for individuals to stay in the UK illegally. such as the ability to easily send money back home. Return agreements. The UK has a limited number of return agreements with countries of origin. This includes 7 formal readmission treaties and 17 informal memorandums of understanding. However, in 2024, 43,600 illegal migrants detected entering the UK, 33,039, 75% came from a country with which there was no return agreement, formal or informal. It is therefore essential that countries of origin are persuaded, forcefully if required, to adopt a readmissions treaty with the UK, as Albania has recently done. The third country scheme, unencumbered by membership of the ECHR and immigration tribunals, must also be resumed in order to remove migrants that cannot be returned to their country of origin. In total, the Rwandan scheme costs £715 million, but provision should be made for an expenditure of £1.5 billion on a viable third country scheme. Remittances. A 25% tax should be applied to all remittances going to nations identified as large illegal migrant populations in the UK. World Bank data shows that in 2021, the latest available year, the top 5 nations for illegal migrants in the UK received outward remittances of 1. India, £4.46 billion, 2. Pakistan, £2.94 billion, 3. Nigeria, £2.76 billion, China, £1.24 billion. Bangladesh is number 5 at £818 million. This means that a total of £12.2 billion is estimated to leave the UK economy each year to nations from which a large proportion of illegal migrants are known to originate. A 25% taxation rate on these remittances would generate, therefore, up to £3 billion per annum for investment into deportation facilities. Adjusting for behavioral changes could estimate that such a measure would raise £10 billion over a 5-year time span. Just as importantly, such a measure would also bring a huge pressure into governments of these nations, incentivizing them to introduce measures to repatriate their own citizens who are in the UK illegally. Foreign aid. All foreign aid to these 5 nations with considerable high illegal migrant population should be withheld until such time that they have taken appropriate action to extract their citizens in this country without permission. Again, this would apply significant pressure on the governments of these countries to engage with this process, as well as providing savings to be reinvested in the process of mass deportation. In total, the most recent figures show that these countries £268.4 in foreign aid in 2023. I believe that should be million, or 23, which would extrapolate to £1.4 billion over a 5-year time frame. 1. Nigeria, £100 million. 2. Pakistan, £69 million. Bangladesh, £58 million. India, £33.4 million. China, £8 million. The UK bilateral budget was £2.7 billion in 2023. Other countries in receipt of funding that have large immigrant asylum seeker populations in the UK must also be reviewed. Money should not be awarded unless a country of origin A agrees to take back its citizens, B takes demonstrable measures to encourage the return of its citizens. Visas. Visa overstays are a significant driver of illegal migrant population. In the year ending March 2020, 4.8% of visa expiries did not have an accompanying record of an individual having left the country. The largest volume of these for visitor visas, with 54,046, 3.8% of all expires not having evidence of a departure from the UK. Visitor visas should therefore be targeted on those countries known to have large illegal migrant populations in Britain. The 5 countries identified above received the following number of visas in 2024. 1. India, 734,702 entry visas, including 549,249 tourist visas and 92,355 study visas. 2. China, 638,511 entry visas, including 515,528 tourist visas and 1,561 study visas. Pakistan is number 3, 178,301 entry visas, including 89,507 tourist visas and 38,140 study visas. 4. Nigeria, 154,236 entry visas, including 98,568 tourist visas and 27,130 study visas. 5. Bangladesh, 37,723 entry visas, including 17,771 tourist visas and 7,191 study visas. There were 1.2 million tourist visas awarded to these 5 nations, identified by Home Office data as having large numbers of individuals potentially without immigration status. This could potentially translate to nearly 50,000 visa overstayers, capping at 50% of the present total the number of tourist visas issued to these countries until such time that there evidence of large number of illegal migrants having left Britain will again bring significant pressure on national governments, ensure that the illegal migrant crisis is not further compounded, and help to isolate those in the UK illegally. Costs and savings. Costs. The direct costs set out in the research paper total £47.5 billion over a 5-year period. Immigration enforcement's at £30 billion. Detention facilities, £5.4 billion. Estate management, £3.6 billion. Enforced returns, £4.6 billion. Voluntary returns, £2.4 billion. Third country, £1.5 billion. However, aiming to hit 150,000 enforced returns and 250,000 voluntary returns by the third year of any parliament would mean that a significant proportion of illegal migrant population could have been removed within 4 years, making the total roughly £40.9 billion for complete delivery. Savings. A large illegal migrant population has huge secondary economic effects. These include suppressed wages for low-skilled workers, the cost of crime, a slump in productivity as businesses starve off investment, a loss in income taxes and employer national insurance contributions, reduction in the supply of housing, a diluted impact on capital stock for the British public. These are not accounted for in the below. The Home Office 2023 impact assessment accompanying the illegal migration bill allows us to calculate roughly attributable cost to each illegal migrant present in the UK. Contestable public services, i.e. public transport, waste management, fire protection services, £3,859. Wider public services, i.e. police services, £665. A 2013 Department for Health report found that an annual cost of illegal migrant on NHS was £570, £787 in today's money. Total expenditures £5,311. For a child migrant with the cost of education, this figure increases by at least a further £4,000. If we assume that for each migrant the cost of education, this figure increases by at least a further £4,000. If we assume that each migrant expenditure, the Treasury recoups roughly £2,000 via indirect taxes, this would mean that the average illegal migrant in the UK would cost between £3,311 and £7,311. Assuming 1 million illegal adults and 200,000 illegal children, the total annual cost is £4.78 billion, which we would then add to the forecast £5 billion to be saved by restoring order to the asylum system. In total, illegal migration directly costs the UK just under £10 billion per year, £9.78 billion. It should be added that this figure is incredibly conservative, owing to it not including the considerable secondary economic effects that are set out above. Conclusion: this research note has set out the framework required for the deportation of 1.2 million illegal migrants. Achieving this feat will not be easy and will face considerable pushback from the media, NGOs, industry bodies, and pockets of civil service. However, policies such as the considerable increase in migration enforcement personnel and funding would allow for the new government to create an effective department within the department that is deliberately crafted for the removal of illegal migrants. Public accountability, stretching targets, and transparency of steps being taken and roadblocks encountered are vital to ensure that the process has the necessary impetus to pursue the headline objective. Time frames such as the one drafted set out below are the important component of this. Year 1, deportations of those in assignment accommodation, the construction of necessary detention facilities, an increase in enforced returns to 60,000, and an objective for voluntary returns to reach 100,000. Year 2, enforced returns to reach 100,000 and voluntary returns to reach 200,000. Year 3, enforced returns to reach 150,000 and voluntary returns to reach 250,000. Year 4, enforced returns to stay at 150,000 and voluntary returns to stay at 250,000. Ultimately, the most important attribute required to deport all illegal migrants is the political will to do so. A preparedness to pursue new lines of thought to adjust to the changing profile of the illegal migrant being sought, an unwavering nerve in the face of backlash. 2/3 of the British public support removal of all illegal migrants, and it is a policy that is in the national interest. This must be any future government lodestar when embarking on this mission. And that is the end of the mass deportation policy that Rupert Lowe has put forward. Well, I read the whole thing for you. Give me a like on the video if you actually made it this far into the video. And I thank you for watching, and please consider watching another one, and see you in the next video. Again, thank you for watching. Please consider watching another video. Like and share so the videos get traction, and I appreciate it, and have yourself a wonderful day.